never used to do that.
You have more trouble with your chair.
Now, you could leave me sit there.
Are we on already?
Two till
No,
the
my
next
goodness.
morning.
really, we are.
So
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 11th in-depth Muscatine City Council meeting. Cinda, will you please do the roll call?
Councilmember Spread,
Present.
Harvey,
Present.
Rockert,
Present.
Saucedo,
Present.
Hackett,
Present.
Fitzgerald,
Present.
Malcolm,
Sit back.
6 present, 1 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cinda.
I feel like my volume's cranked up.
You what?
Got my
But I
timer.
feel like my volume's cranked up. I'm sitting back and big
There
time.
you go. Well, we're going to dispense with a lot of our formalities tonight since it's an in-depth meeting. We have several different things that we wanted to have discussions on. Jim's already up there and he's going to teach us everything we want to know about the acronym SUDAS.
Which stands for Statewide Urban Design and Specifications Program. And I want you to appreciate this, okay? This looks like a lot. This is actually 1/3. There's 2 other volumes that go along with it. I was just too lazy to tote them down here. But in essence, it constitutes all of the specifications and all the standard details and all the ways to design all of the things you need to do to run a city. A lot of towns, many towns have adopted this already. The suburban metro area around Des Moines, they're all on SUDAS. Davenport adopted it just a little bit ago. The whole idea behind that is if you can adopt to a standard and make that your standard for the city for all of these infrastructure things. And it's the same as most everybody else. Contractors are used to it, more familiarity, better prices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have already designed a couple projects in town to that. Mississippi Drive was a SUDAS project. Mulberry was a SUDAS project. So we are embarking on a very strenuous, going to take a long time, maybe as long as a year to work our way through all of this to figure out what we want to adopt, what we might not want to adopt, and put together a document. Took Davenport 4 years to do that from start to finish.
So we can take pieces of it that we want.
Yes.
But-
So you can take what you want.
Okay.
You can exempt out the rest. And that is what we have been working on this winter, Pat and I, and what we're going to continue to work on. But as we go along this and hit each one of these chapters, you're going to see me for about 6 minutes, every in-depth from here till eternity. Right, Greg? Or till we get done with it, just to give you a little snippet. So you have 3 pages in front of you that look like this. You guys got those?
Yes.
Okay. The first one that should be on the top should say Major Storm Residential / Collector Street. Please note on that there's a 6-inch dimension right in the middle of that street. And what's blue represents water, what's gray represents a street. So when you get into your street design in SUDAS, and again, these are standards that have been adopted in a lot of different places, when you have a major storm, we're going to get rid of things like a 100-year storm and a 10-year storm because people don't relate to them and they misinterpret them. So we're going to have 2 classifications, a major storm, minor storm. And a major storm, when you have, and you design your storm sewer system and your streets, when you get that major storm, everything's designed to flood, just like it shows there with the blue on there. All right? So go to the next page, which is a minor storm, residential street. Should be a little smaller. And you can kind of see that when you do your storm sewer and integrate it with your street, when you get a minor storm, what you want to do is just flood to the center line or the crown of the roadway so that traffic moving very slowly could still go down the center of that street. Next sheet shows that for a minor storm on something you would classify as a collector street, what they want to try to design to is so that you would still have about 12-foot minimum, like a single lane down the middle of the street, because there'd be more of a need for emergency traffic access, et cetera, et cetera. Those are wonderful things. Those are pictures of perfection in time. You never get the perfect major storm, you never get the perfect minor storm, but these are the standards to which when someone comes to us and says, what do you guys need in a subdivision? We say, follow SUDAS, and we want to do those designs for the streets and specifically for the storm sewers to be that way. That usually makes the cost of the storm sewers less than what they'd be if we were to require there to be no flooding out on those streets during those storms. So that's just a real quick little snippet of what SUDAS is all about. Look forward to future editions of roadway design, sanitary sewers,
Jim, what's
all sorts of
the,
exciting things.
Thank you. What's a couple of examples of collector streets?
A collector, a good collector.
Tell us some of the streets. Isaac?
Colorado
Colorado?
might be a collector. I mean,
Okay.
residential, I think everybody knows that. It's just a street that is dedicated solely to residential.
Mm-hmm.
Collectors are the ones that collect the traffic off of streets, and then you have major thoroughfares and stuff like that. So anything that isn't residential ends up being either a minor or a major collector in town.
Was Cedar Street designed following these guidelines?
No,
Was there a reason why not?
I don't know.
Okay.
So if you've already designed 2 projects using these standards,
Yes.
what do you need from us?
I don't need anything from you other than just to be aware that this is what
okay.
we're working towards, and this is kind of, I don't want to take those 3 volumes a year from now and plop them down on your guys' counter and say, we're going to adopt this. What do you think?
So you're going to come and
So,
give us little
little
updates
snippets.
each time? Okay.
Just little pieces.
And Mulberry was an IDOT project.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
well.
And so that was definitely to the Illinois DOT standard
Sure.
specifications there.
Iowa.
Did I say Illinois? That's still ringing in my ears for some reason.
Go ahead, Santos.
Is it correct that the SUDAS program gets updated yearly?
Yes,
There are revisions to the SUDAS?
yes.
So how do we manage that? Is that
You
something
write
that
in
we
the code that it's the most recent version. So if somebody comes in 2020, they design to the 2020 version. If somebody comes in 2022, they design to the 2022 version.
But if we're designing projects 2 years out or a year out, I mean, they don't know that changes may be coming in a year and you're already approving projects that are,
Wherever you start. This is just exactly how the DOT does it. They revise their standard specs twice every year, in October and in April. So when a project starts, you write right on the top of the cover sheet, bang, the start date, and then that is, DOT standard specification 2016 or whatever they're on.
when you
And
say
that's
start,
what
when you
governs.
say they start doing the earthwork or start when they get the approval by the council?
They start doing the design. So before it ever gets to you guys for approval, the
Okay.
design is based on this point in time, and you go forward with it. It's a system that everybody's comfortable with and confident and familiar with because that's how the DOT does it. And to be honest, 75% of this mirrors DOT. It's just that the DOT never did a good job of sanitary sewers and storm sewers for residential streets. Everything they had was for design of highways. So it didn't exactly apply.
I'm familiar with the SUDAS program a little bit, but I understand what it is, and I do review it, understand the specifications, and I think that it does add a lot of value. I mean, it kind of
Yeah.
keeps you with consistencies, certain materials, depths, certain compactions, testings that you're gonna be doing.
Yeah,
Tracer
and,
wires,
and,
things like
and
that.
Davenport did some of the heavy lifting. They've struggled through and adopted it. And Bettendorf, Eldridge, I think Leclerc, and Burlington are all in the same process we are right now of figuring out how we want to adopt it.
That's all I have.
Any other questions?
Is this a national?
No, this is, this all started in Des Moines, urban in Des Moines, and around in Des Moines.
I think there's a website you can find, the iowasudos.com or something like that. I think it's run by the Iowa State University. I'm not sure.
Very good.
I'm not sure who's got jurisdiction over it now. It was started by
I think it's in
they
Iowa
had the old,
State, but-
they had this old Metro specs, which was just applied to Des Moines. And then they developed this because there's other towns like us who can benefit from it.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Look forward to hearing from you. Next, we have John Cook. He's going to give us some updates on moving forward. Had a couple changes. Yeah, you're going to have to move that down.
Holy smokes. Or I'm really short, yeah, one or the other. Good evening, everybody. John Cook, Director of your Water and Resource Recovery Facility. I'd like to give you a little update on our project that has to do with MARV, Muscatine Area Resource Recovery for Vehicles and Energy. The biggest part of this movement that we call MARV is the receiving station to bring in food waste. We'd like to remember that there's about 30% of all things going to the landfill are organics, and we are targeting things that are going to landfills to remove things that we can actually use to make fuel and fertilizer instead of having that sit in the landfill and producing methane gas and going off and taking up space and all that. You know, that's the biggest reason why we really kind of dove into this project in the first place, was really, it was the right thing to do. We saw that it could make us some money, but I think we need to keep focused on the benefits that go beyond just a little bit of the revenue. Hopefully we can have a lot of revenue later on, but this part of the project really like to focus on the movement of MARV, where we're going to go out and educate people about food waste, about the problems that are involved with this, about how 40% of all food produced is not eaten. And that number has to sink in for most people. If you think about it, you're like, that's no way that can be right. 40% of all food produced is not eaten. So there's a huge problem in this country getting food to hungry people, having production that meets demand, and all the waste that is going to landfills. So we're not just targeting the waste. We're not just saying, hey, bring us all this stuff. We're actually going to target the entire spectrum of what that is through communication, through dedicated services to finding food to get to the hungry people, and everything along the spectrum. So I think we're really doing a community service here, as opposed to just something that's targeted to one little project and one little division of the city. So facilities that we've been designing, and I know I've been talking about this for a very long time, the receiving stations are going to be receiving food from manufacturing, grocery stores, restaurants, you name it. Whoever is having whoever has food that is inedible and is heading to the landfill, we're going to target them and they're going to bring it here. I think the biggest users will be the industries that are in the area. It's just a fact of manufacturing, when you're trying to produce millions of pieces of product a day, that you're going to end up with some that you can't use. Or you're going to warehouse it, and it's not going to get to where it needs to go at the right time, so that's going to be a really big part of what we have. We're talking 5 or 6 facilities that have already talked to me that already say they do about 10 tons of waste a day. So that's each. 10 tons each of waste a day. That's a lot of waste. So we also have a company that picks up stuff from grocery stores, just throws it in the back of a truck, and then they take it all the way across the state to a compost facility. So they're pretty excited about having something locally to do that with. Just talked yesterday to somebody in West Liberty Foods, who's very excited about having us come, to have us open this as well. But it just kind of keeps growing and growing. The number of people that hear about it, that want to be involved, and how this project expands is almost a daily thing. We just had a conversation with Alliant Energy yesterday, who's our gas supplier in town. So once we make the gas, we need to know what we're going to do with it. And, there's always, we can make electricity, except that we live in Muscatine. We're very blessed to have very low power costs. And so it didn't make sense to make electricity out of it. So injecting it into the pipeline seems like a really good idea. And then just today, I hear another source from somebody who is going to be taking it via transport to a larger facility because they are not near a gas line, but they're trying to get a conglomerate of biogas producers in the area to do it this way, where you load it on, you compress it, put it on these tankers that go to a truck, and then you inject it into the pipeline, which means we don't have to expend the $3-4 million worth of capital to get this stuff into the pipeline. So there's more and more options that open up every day. So we're really excited about how that's gonna play out. So we don't know where it's gonna end, but we sure hope that it's gonna be something bigger and better than we ever even imagined. So, but Muscatine doesn't make enough gas on their own in order to have a project like this. So we're gonna take in food. That's why we're taking in this food, is so that we can actually produce enough gas to say that we're a supplier large enough to be considered for some of these other projects. So we started out looking at building a nice, beautiful, fancy building right on the site, and had 3 truck docks, 3 truck bays there for all these trucks to come in, and a drive-through for them to drop off stuff. And unfortunately, it came in way over budget. We really can self-fund this. There weren't any grants available, so that's really a kind of a nice thing, actually. Well, we would have taken a grant, of course, but we didn't have to finance this at all. Or we're trying not to. So we rejected the bids, went back out, did a little conversion when actually to look at the transfer station, which is the picture you see up here, on how we would actually go about bringing stuff to the recycling center, which has been mostly unused in recent years. But we left kind of a nice fancy, less fancy, but still a nice liquid receiving station, and then all the rest of the projects. And it came in closer to the budget that we were looking for. We got about $3 million. That came in about $3.36 million. But you know, we have equipment on top of that. We have about another $600-some thousand in engineering and things. So really, we wanted to be much lower than that. Value engineering was explored with our engineers, but honestly, I think it changed the project way too much. And to really get it to where we needed to be, cut this project almost in a third. And so it really didn't make it really wasn't the same project at that point. You can't just take the low bid and then change the project by a third and say that's, you know, it's the same project. So we rejected bids last week. You all agreed. So we're going back out to bid on the project, and here's how it kind of looks. We've changed the transfer station a little bit, but we should be improving what they're doing. As you see right now, trucks come in, they go over the scale, they go in through into the tipping floor here, they tip, and then they drive out like that, scale out, and then away they go. And they never had a place to park over here before, so anybody trying to utilize the station would never really, they were kind of crowded around, so we're going to add a parking lot, a little drive-through section here, so the trucks can actually pull through, park like you see out in the rest areas, how the semi-trucks have those really big, long things they can pull into and park. And then they could park. This isn't really working on that screen very well, is it? But sorry. Yeah, well.
Use the mouse.
It's doing better right here for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway.
Use the mouse pointer instead.
Really, this doesn't.
It's the square box on the keyboard.
Oh.
There you go.
So there's the truck where the trucks will be able to park. And customers as well. I mean, it's been kind of crowded for a while, and nobody really knows where to park. You know, when you need to use the office that's right here, where do you park? These were all staff parking. You had to park all the way over here to walk all the way back in here, so people end up parking just kind of in front of the building. Now we have nice places for them to pull in. They could park. Now it's going to be a pill right here. So anyway. We also, what we're going to do, since this is the recycling center section right here, so now the trucks can come in, we're going to run them over the scale, and we're going to run them this way around here so that they can come in and park in the truck. Well, that's a one-way for everybody else, because most trucks come through here and they're going out that way, so we're going to expand the road. So it's kind of hard to see right here, but there's actually an expansion to the road all the way around so we can get two-way truck traffic through there. That was one of the options, was to kind of put the kibosh on that and try to change traffic patterns. That would have saved us enough money maybe to go ahead with the liquid receiving station, but I don't really want to mess with the transfer station people. They've been nice enough to let me park my project in their facility, so we're not going to do that to them, and I think we can do okay without it. The other thing that we can do is when we take waste, they can drive right into this facility here. They're going to dump on the floor, and then they can drive right out, and away they go. If we want to scale them again, we can actually turn them around. They can come back all the way around, scale out, and away they go that way. Any questions on the transfer station section? So this is the inside of the recycling center. This is the door where they can come in. Here are the truck docks, the 3 truck bays. This is the T42 turbo separator. I love saying that. This kind of just sounds good. It's a really neat machine that will, you can take the food out, you drop the food in this hopper right here, it drops it into the machine, the waste comes out into this bin here, and then the food waste is pumped into tankers that will be sitting right in here. Now, we're reserving this area for the recycling center. They've asked that they retain 50% of the center, but they don't really need it right now. They're not looking at utilizing it, but they don't want to give up the whole farm for this thing. So we're going to let them have it, and when they want it back, we can park our tankers outside, I think, and find a way to do that and run them out that way. So the tankers then will drive down to the Water Resource Center to drop off their material and do that way. So I think it works out pretty well. There is an opportunity. There is a lift station on site here as well. For the whole facility, and the waste we're going to have a wash down. This is a tipping floor area, so trucks can drive in, they can back up, tip on the floor here, and then our machines will come and scoop up the stuff and put it in the machine that runs through. This loose stuff is, imagine those little dinners that you get at Hy-Vee. It comes in a container. It's got 2 pieces of chicken, mashed potatoes, coleslaw. Well, that sits there for a couple days and nobody buys it, and it's past its prime, so they got to throw it away. Well, they don't open the container and dump out the food. They just chuck it in the trash right now. So they're really excited to be able to take that. All they have to do is just throw the container and food, everything all at once, right into the special food bin coming to us. We can put it right on the floor right there, scoop it up with a big scooper, throw it through the machine. The food will come out one way and the trash will come out the other way. And now we've cleaned up their mess. And they think that's going to be a huge thing for them to be able to do. But there is a lift station on site as well, so that at some point we may not have to tanker it. We could actually pump things through out to the lift station. It may require an upgrade to the lift station, and then that pumps it directly to the treatment plant as well. You had a question, Max?
Question, John.
Sure.
You mentioned about West Liberty Foods sending you products.
Yes.
When they send you turkey products and stuff, are these products going to contain bone and whatever as well?
Question about bone in the turkey products. Yes, we can take bone in the turkey products.
That machine will separate the bone from the meat?
It doesn't do it great. No, it does not. But it does mash it up pretty well.
So then your machine then will utilize the bone in its fabrication of gas.
Yep, the bone and the marrow and everything else, we can actually pulverize that. It'll go into another area where it goes through a grinding pump type of machine so that it doesn't foul up the pumps. And it probably won't break down, it's bone. But, going out, the small amount that we have going out to where it's going to be is a fine soil amendment. Also, it's not going to be harmful to anything. So, but that's the only kind of animal waste we're going to have. There won't be any other kind of animal waste involved. But yeah, we could take that. So people, when you're done with your turkey dinner on Thanksgiving, throw it in a bucket and bring it down to us. All the stuff that's left over on the turkey and all the other fat and giblets and skins and all that other stuff. You bring it down to us, and instead of throwing it in the trash where it's going to go sit in the landfill and decompose, you bring it to us and we'll make gas and fertilizer out of it. It's pretty cool. Like that? Yes.
Having been out at the landfill, the old, when we used to have to take stuff out there, and West Liberty Foods would bring their truck out and dump next to my trailer. There was a slight odor.
Yeah.
Really a nasty odor.
Yep.
You're dumping food product on the floor. You gonna hose this down twice a day?
Yep. Yeah, those are renderings, and those are other very nasty things that we will not be accepting at this facility.
Okay.
No, there's a limit to what we're going to bring into the facility. They do drive that in and scale it every once in a while, and a truck made a turn too sharp one day, and about a spot that big splashed out on the road, and it smelled for a week.
Yeah.
Ew.
So things like that will not be coming in.
Okay.
This is the leftover things, and most of this stuff gets into a package. Most of the things are going to got into a package, it went into a box, and then it sat somewhere and didn't get used.
Okay.
Or it fell off of the conveyor belt, and they can't just throw it back in the box. I mean, it's health violations. So they scoop all this up at the end of the day, and they just throw it in a bin and they throw it away. And actually, West Liberty Foods is driving it all the way to Wisconsin right now to be depackaged. So they're pretty stoked about bringing that to us.
Nice.
So they don't have to do that.
Just a thought.
Yeah. So if you look, you can see drains around the floor. That's what all the wash down is. So we can wash this place down all the time, and hot water will be available. So it's going to be a nice, clean facility.
Okay.
We got all kinds of people looking at us. We'll talk to Tyson's too, at some point. Everybody is available. It's a really matter right now of how much capacity we have. I mean, I can only run this thing, you know. Well, I mean, when we start, we're going to have to start small, but yeah, we can start taking all kinds of people.
So, John, it sounds to me like in addition to the natural gas production that we'll be doing and the waste reduction that we'll be doing, we're also, by just the actions that we're taking, going to be saving on fossil fuel usage, because you're telling me about all these people that are driving long distances to dump their waste, that they won't have to do that anymore. So that, I like that a lot. That's a good thing.
Yeah, to achieve zero waste, they're driving things clear across the country.
Right.
So I mean, and they have to calculate that into their carbon footprint. I mean, they do. Mm-hmm. So their emissions numbers go down. Everything for them goes down. And this fuel is actually a carbon negative fuel. When you make CNG out of food waste that did not go to the landfill, it makes it carbon negative. And that's a win. That's a huge win for everybody. Yep. Any questions about this? It's pretty straightforward. We're not really in any huge construction costs yet.
Okay.
What do I do? Trying to touch a screen. It's not a touch screen, aren't I? You'd think I could figure that out by now. This is the T42 turbo separator. Just a little bit closer picture of it so you can really get a good view. And it's a monster. It's really cool. There are different versions of different. I looked at lots and lots of different machines that do this. There's some that squeeze. There's some that kind of pulverize. There's some that do exactly what this does, but it does it up in the air. There's all different kinds of ways that we looked at this, but the materials that specifically that we're talking about bringing, especially glass jars possibly from Heinz, but full of gravy, and the fact that this guy is made up in Minnesota, and everything else is made in Europe. I really kind of like that.
Yeah.
John,
Yes.
is what we see here a package?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How much is just this unit alone?
$350,000.
Do we have, does that come with spare parts, and spare motors, or what does it come with?
There are parts and there are things that come with it. Mostly it's the paddles, because there are paddles attached to it, and we get spares of those because you get something in there that it's not supposed to hit, something too hard, they can break off. They're designed to break off so they don't break the machine.
And warranty with the turnkey from the manufacturer or anything?
There's warranty. I can't tell you what it is at the moment, but yes, there's warranties.
But for $350,000, will we have the manufacturer here for the site startup?
Yes, manufacturer shows up for startups.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And it's nice that they're right up the road if we need anything else. So, of course, everybody else says, "Oh, we have a dealership here. We have a dealership in St. Louis. We have a dealership here." But things made in Minnesota, for crying out loud. I just kind of like that.
One question, John. Is this in use anywhere else where you've been able to go see one in action?
It is. I've seen it a couple times actually. I saw it in San Diego at a food bank. The T30. That's the little brother of the T42. But California has a rule where if you produce enough food, or if you're going to throw a certain amount of food for any facility at all, you have to have food depackaging destruction. You have to do it, even a food bank. It's a big one. Obviously, it's San Diego, but so they had to fundraise. They had to get all this kind of stuff, and they were running one. And I was out there for a biogas conference, and I got to go to the food bank and see one run. So that was really nice. And every time I see one, I get new ideas about how to do it. The next one I saw was in Hermitage, Pennsylvania. where a guy just as nuts as me in a wastewater plant just decided to do this because it sounded like a good idea. And he's been immensely successful with his. He's been doing it for 10 years. The machine works great. There's different things, but he told me, he's like, whatever you do, don't do this, don't do this, you should do this, you should do this. So it was great to see somebody who's been running one for 10 years tell me what to do and what not to do.
Okay.
And all that, so.
So its reliability, you feel pretty good about that?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
So I wish I could make this picture bigger. I don't know what happens here. How do I do that?
Bigger on mine.
There we go. That didn't do it.
The plus and minus over to the right.
Try this one over here. Boy, this is gonna be a pain, isn't it?
Maybe we need to budget for a touch screen over there.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Somebody who can run it better. No, don't go up. I'm pointing down. Why is it going up? I don't want that.
Well,
I think a touch
Go
screen would
up
be
then.
Less expensive in
That's
the
what I'm
budget.
doing.
than a
Okay, that's good
staff
enough, right?
person to
Everybody see
stand there
that?
and run it.
Okay. So, the biggest change that we're gonna make to this is the liquid receiving. Liquid receiving is fog, fats, oils, and grease mostly. This comes from restaurants, cafeterias, schools, things like that that have large-scale kitchens from grease interceptors, grease traps, all that kind of nasty stuff. And these come in 5,000-gallon tankers. You can also get it from lots of manufacturing facilities. We get calls all the time, bizarro calls from manufacturers that say, I got a tank full of this stuff. Can you bring it? Or I got a pond full of water of this stuff. It's mostly water. Here's a sample of it. Can you bring it? So we need to have a facility to bring liquid waste in like that. We had a nice kind of big automated system where people could come in 24/7, had a bar screen or an automatic screen to take out the trash. It just seemed like that was a kind of our limiting factor. That was the thing that we didn't need to do. We were doing it for our customers that were going to come in, and we may do that still. That would be something that we could look at doing down the road, have something built after we're rolling in the dough, I guess, as you say. But I think to get this project and to keep it moving, to keep our momentum going and really get this going, we can skip it and we can do something like this, which is going to keep us on target. So if you look, this is where we are, if you know the facility at all, if you've been there, the main office is down here. This is where you park. So the trucks will drive around in here, come down, and they'll pull this way, and then they'll back up right to here, and this is where our storage tanks were going to be anyway. We were just going to we're going to pump it and pipe to those storage tanks. So if the trucks are parked right here, all I have to do is drop a line in there and just gravity it right into the tanks. No pumps, no tanks, no extra things at all. Just down and dirty. We're calling it the bare bones facility. Just get it in and get out type of thing. So the food that we bring in tankers could sit right about in here and do the same thing. They can just drop it in by gravity, and then they're driving right out, and there's a gate right out here. They can just drive right out. So it's still going to require that they come in during business hours, but that's not such a bad thing either. And we're going to put a little screening system where it says liquid waste receiving. We're going to build our own screen so that we can take the trash out, and we're going to make them clean it too. They're just standing there, unloading their tankers. It's their trash. So they just have to sit there and rake the trash off the screen and throw it in the dumpster, and away they go. We'll put some meters on there. They write the beginning and ending meters, and they can be on their way. And our staff doesn't have to sit there. My staff has been sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 hours while these trucks unload. So waste of staff time and money as well. Yes, Max?
Where's going to be the greater profit margin? In the grease or in the rendering?
Where's the greater profit margin, grease or the waste food? We initially thought that it was going to be the liquid waste. Turns out that is not where it is. The waste food far outweighs the liquid waste that we are going to receive. It's amazing how much solid waste packaged food is out there going to landfill.
Why mess with the grease?
Because it's the low-hanging fruit. It comes in a tanker. It's really easy to deal with. Just all they do is they just let it run off into our tanks, and it's like rocket fuel for our digesters. The food waste is good, but the but the fog is like crack for the digesters. They just those bugs just go nuts, and they create a lot of gas. So we don't want to take it away from them completely. And you got to feed them a steady source of it, otherwise they get mad at you. So there you go. Any questions about this area? This is really the biggest change. If you've seen the old plans, take out everything that has to do with the liquid receiving station, just rip it out and put this one page in. This is our cost savings. This is where we're going to save, estimated from engineering, about $1.1 million at least, I think. Yep.
Did I understand right, the tankers coming in, they've got to use back-in parking for this?
Yes, back-in parking.
Okay.
They're professionals, though.
All right.
I think they'll be all right. So it's still much, much better than what we're doing right now. Leaps and bounds. Okay, that's pretty close. So this is the next little section. This is what stays. This is actually where the food goes in, is actually stored in these two tanks right here. We're going to utilize one tank first, but we have this one available for whenever we are ready to expand. This is a recirculation system that actually has a grinder pump attached to it. So the material is drawn out, goes through the pump into the tank, swirls around so this material doesn't congeal. You can imagine fog and grease and oils and stuff, you know, you let it sit, it's just going to recongeal and everything else, and it's kind of nasty. It grows a nice film on top, or a thick chunky layer on top, so it needs to roll this way and a roll and everything else like that. You don't like my descriptions, Jim? So this is and then this is the other pump that, whoop, what did I do here? So this is the other pump that actually will pull from the tank, send it down to the other facility, which I'll show in the next picture, goes through a heat exchanger, warms the material, and then comes back. So this material, I mean, if you can imagine, you know what happens when you set grease out and it gets to room temperature, right, or less? It gets hard as a rock, right? I mean, it thickens up. So you don't want it to get too cool, so we warm it up. We don't want to warm it up too much. You don't want to go to 100 degrees, because then you start the digestion process in the wrong spot. So you want it about 80 degrees so that the oils and the greases don't congeal, but you don't start any of the digestion process, and we can kind of control how much heat we're going to put to that. Okay? Any questions about this little spot? This is down the basement. You probably have never seen this area. This is not on the tour of the wastewater plant, generally.
So this is all new piping?
The Freddy Krueger room, yeah.
This is all new piping?
It is mostly new piping. The pipes that go down to the heat exchangers and back are existing pipes. That's why we decided to use those, because everything is set up already. I mean, everything is supposed to come into this building, and it's not supposed to go back and down. But the two pipes were there, and the heat exchangers were down at the other end. So instead of building or buying heat exchangers for this area, we just decided to use the ones that are already sitting there, ready to go. Then you don't have to buy another boiler either.
So, in your process, I'm not familiar with how all of this stuff works other than what you explained. Does the pH change?
Does the pH change? The pH of fog is relatively low. It can be 4 or so or less, so it's very corrosive. Yeah. When you mix it with other things, the pH should adjust up. And a lot of the material that we're bringing in that we know right now is going into the digesters, which will be mixed in with this material, is very alkaline. So we're hoping that this product will...
In this case where you just mentioned that, what piping and material is that?
Oh, the piping material?
I mean, if you're going to have a pH of 4,
yeah,
when you start getting between 3 and 2, you're already going to start eating that pipe up.
Yeah, the pipe that goes back and forth is just ductile, so we're going to have to watch on that one. But that's to get us going. I think what we can probably do is bring boiler water back to the facility, to this room here, and then get a heat exchanger put in or something along those lines. That's something that we could possibly do in the future, so that we're not piping the material down and back. But we're going to have to pipe that stuff down there somehow, some way. And in the future, we could actually run pipes in a different direction, and then we would probably use what's it called? Fiberglass, yeah, fiber spun type of stuff, which is super slick and super resistant to all different kinds of things. That's what we were planning on using for a lot of this.
Fibercast?
Fiberglass.
Fiberglass, okay.
Fiberglass, yeah.
So, my last question then, you mentioned grease and things like that going down here. What kind of fire protection are we having in there?
Fire protection.
Yeah. Like, or do you have any fire protection for any of this piping? You got valves, you got gases, you got oils going through there.
Well,
How are we gonna protect the employees and the people working down there? And you don't have an arc flash, you don't have anything potentially catch on fire?
we don't really have anything down there for that, no. I mean, the MCCs are not in the area. There's nothing in the area really to have.
Well, I saw motors, and that's why I was wondering, and I saw pumps on this one. That
There's a
you just
motor,
showed.
yep, there is.
And so,
This is all contained, so we're not having, the tanks are outside, so there really isn't any liquid in the room where the pumps are,
but this is in the basement, in the Freddy Krueger room, right?
right?
So
Yep.
that's almost like a small area where that would be more prone, in my view, especially when you just mentioned the oils. I'm okay, I'm just asking.
Sure.
That's not
Sure.
there. Okay.
So this is kind of a 4-part project. So this is the last part, and I knew it was going to be that. It's going to be a pill, isn't it? Again. This is just a lot of pipes and really confusing things to look at. So all it's showing is we're going to actually, when the material comes in, the heat exchangers, which are on the far end here, these are the unused heat exchangers that have been sitting down there. These heat exchangers are used for the digesters, so we're going to utilize existing heating exchangers to heat the material. So the material come in, runs through the heat exchangers, and then heads back this way out to the storage tanks. And right here, we're going to take a little bit off of that and dose them into the digesters. The key to the digester feeding is that you do it slowly and you do it consistently. So the pumps that we have here are good dosing pumps, and we can set those for however many gallons per minute we want. You feed them too fast and the thing pukes. You feed them too slow and you lose the methanogens that actually make your methane the best. So you want to keep a steady flow of stuff into there. Okay. Any questions on that piping mess that you see there?
Just same question, is it all ductile, is it all carbon steel,
This
is
is
it
ductile
stainless?
down. That part was ductile, right, Jay? The new pipe is fiberglass. Anything new is fiberglass. The existing pipes are ductile.
Okay.
Anything else? And the last little piece of this puzzle that we're going to keep for our friend Dave Pop down at the transfer station is the vac pad. We're going to try to keep it anyway. All this thing is a pad for the vac and jet trucks to come. They dump their material down on this, and it falls to the, they dump it right here, it falls to the end, and the water gets drained out, and we can come in here and scoop out the material. Right now, they go around, they clean hundreds of miles of pipe all the time, mostly of rock, dirt, roots, food, grease. I mean, there's all kinds of nasty stuff that comes out of those pipes. And they don't really have a good appropriate place to take it right now. They've been waiting for somebody to build a vac pad for them. So we're going to try to keep that in the project. Its location is over by where the old liquid receiving station is, and it seems to be a good place for them to get in and out, so we're going to leave it there. And there's a connection to existing drainage water for the water to drain away. So we're going to try to keep that in the project for them so they have a good place to go. That's it. So really the only changes we made were the liquid receiving portion of it. We're going to bring trucks into a different spot and save a bunch of money. Keep this thing going. Keep the dream alive. So.
And your building's on crack.
And the bugs are on crack.
Oh, okay. Just thought I'd question.
Any other questions?
So, on the actual bid itself, your request is to go with the lowest bidder, remove the alternates versus rebidding it?
We
Or
removed all,
is that what we're gonna have a discussion, or do we need a consensus or anything like that?
no, we don't need anything. We already rejected the bids last week.
Okay,
So
So we are
we took
rebidding.
out all the alternates and we changed the project more dramatically than I was comfortable doing, and we still weren't gaining $1 million like
Okay.
we are now. So, well, not quite. This way, it's cleaner, it's easier, it just removes a whole portion of the project, and we can build this ourselves. We can build the rest of this in-house. So that's the other part of this. We don't even have to have the contractor rebid that project where we saw where the trucks are parked. I don't need them to do anything. So I don't have to redesign, I don't have to do anything else like that.
okay.
Just take that piece out, rebid it without that piece at all. And our crews can come in, it takes a road grader and some aggregate to build this thing the way we want it. And there's a little building there, but my guys can build sheds just as well as anybody else. So
So you don't feel like you're settling, you're comfortable with this?
I'm very comfortable with it. I like that it's gonna be a lot cheaper project as well. That's a great thing, I think. And I think it'll run fine. I think it'll be just fine. You know, I mean, everybody was everybody liked the fact that they could come there 24/7, but maybe my guys are kind of like, we kind of like to keep an eye on these guys anyway. So, may not be a bad thing. All these things that happen, don't look at them as problems, look at them as opportunities, right? I mean, that receiving station would have never happened. I've never found that if we hadn't lost that first bid. And I think that's a great place to have everything, because the recycling center is being recycled. I think that's pretty cool.
Any other comments? Thank you, John. Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah.
Can you pull your microphone down?
Wow. So is there anything in the future for just like residents? Like I take a big pickle jar and I dump all my grease and fat and stuff in there, and then when it gets full, I throw it in my garbage can and it goes.
Sure.
So is there gonna be some place for small quantities, like we can go dump our small quantities of stuff?
Absolutely. Just like back in the olden days when you had to take your recycling to the recycling center, you'll do the same thing with your food waste. So you can drive it over there, you can dump it off, and there won't be any charge or anything at the moment. What I'd like to see, of course, are these little facilities around town where you could take material like that, drop it off, but you end up with stuff that you don't really want in there a lot of times when that happens. You need some really motivated people. If they're motivated enough to drive it down to you, they'll do it. If you set stuff out around, you end up with a lot of trash that you don't want in there. What I would like to see is a motivated entrepreneur, say, coming in and saying, hey, you can set your food waste out on your curb and I'll come pick it up. They'll take it down to me. I charge them a fee, and then they charge you a fee, and everybody's happy. He makes money, we make money. You get rid of your food, you didn't have to drive it down to me, and we have a new business in town as well, private business. So that's somebody's completely their choice to do. If somebody wants to do that, go for it. Because I don't think we're going to start a route picking up food waste anytime soon.
So if somebody's cleaning out their parents' house and there's a bunch of canned goods that are on the shelf that are obviously expired, that machine will rip them
Well, you need to
apart.
realize that past the due date and expired are different. Just because the stamp on the thing says, this is the best buy date,
Well, yeah,
we need to make sure that we're not looking at best buy date. That just means that's when the company thinks it's going to be the freshest. So you can actually go beyond that and have perfectly good food. So if you find that in your grandma's house and the best buy date is only a year past or something like that, take it to the food bank. Let them figure out if they're sold or they want to use it or not, okay? If this stuff is 5, 7 years old, yes, bring it to me and we'll take care of it.
Go ahead, Santos.
So in the presentation that you've given, and you mentioned about no fire protection, it's still on my mind a little bit in regards to the fact that we're producing gas, and yet we have no way of potential sparks protections of somebody comes unloads smoking a cigarette or something. How do I protect the employees? Is Stanley telling us that it's okay that we don't have any fire protection?
The gas is not in the areas where anybody is. The gas is at the other end of the facility.
So there's no protection there?
There is gas alarms in that area, yes, where there is. But as far as we're flaring it off right now, so there isn't any other gas protection there, or flame protection or anything like that. It's just like having natural gas in your house. You don't have lots of you know.
Well, we have
Fire, super fire
monitors of some sort, but now we're producing it, which is different.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. So, I mean, we're gonna have more quantities, you have more potential risks, and I don't know if, from a city standpoint, if our insurance is good with saying, okay, yeah, you're gonna start producing fuel, and yet you have no due diligence of doing and protecting yourself from a liability or a risk.
Sure.
That's what I'm concerned about.
The receiving portion of this is just like having anything else come into the plant, a hauled waste. It's not hazardous waste. It doesn't produce the gas itself. The digesters and the gas production afterwards is the phase 2. So when we have the gas skid, when we're actually compressing natural gas into injections, we will have all kinds of protections for that. The city's liability will be definitely considered at that point. Right now, we're taking in hauled waste just like we do anything else that we have.
You're taking in oils too, which are flammables.
Not cooking oils. This is not like a petroleum oil that we're bringing in. It's a different kind of oil. It really is.
But it's not flammable?
It can flash. It can. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at.
Yep.
And I just want to make sure that we're clear on
Jay,
that.
do you have something to share?
Yes, Jay Brady, Stanley Consultants. A couple different points I want to make. One is that the holding tanks, the residence time is managed, so the waste is not staying there for very long, and so you're not going to get the digestion action, which would produce the methane gas that you're concerned about. As far as the oils and greases, there's, this is considered typical types of things for like oil, grease separators, and that type of thing. The quantities I think are what we have to pay attention to. If we're getting a lot of fog, then we need to manage that. The normal concentrations that we would be seeing, I don't think are meeting the threshold of concern as far as getting so much buildup in there that you're going to have this issue. There is general fire protection for the treatment plant down there, and then what we do for any of the facilities, we follow NFPA 820, and that's the fire code for wastewater treatment facilities essentially. And that guides us on what areas we have to pay attention to for ventilation and different types of fire protection systems. The digestion area that John's talking about is the area that has the most concern for methane gas, which is the biggest flammable down there.
And I understand that when you're saying that, but we're no longer a waste treatment facility. I mean, it's basically going to be a gas producing facility. So that's why if you're going by NFPA 20, that's one thing, but are we going off of a methane gas production, which probably not. It's not going to be NFPA 20.
Right. I think the difference is we're producing gas, but we're not storing gas beyond the quantities that were originally intended. As John indicated, we're flaring all that off. Now, in the next phases, as we get into gas cleanup and then pipeline injection, that's where we're going to have to be very cognizant of what you're talking about, Santos, as far as are we moving away from a wastewater treatment facility with digesters, which is prescribed in NFPA 820, towards something that is a greater risk that we have to assess. Yep. And definitely if we put a whole bunch of gas storage out there, which we have no intention of doing, but if there would be a lot of gas storage for some reason, that's where we get into a different realm that has different risk potential. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that.
I just want to be making that point. I mean, if
Sure.
we're putting in, a couple of $1 million worth of equipment and piping, is it worth $70,000 worth of, a dry system of some sort or a, pressurized system for fire protection? I mean, we build places, we're required for most, new facilities. To me, this is a new expansion that's a capital-wide expansion that would be cheap insurance in my view versus coming back in and saying, hey, we didn't catch this and now the place caught on fire and we have $2 million of repairs.
Sure.
That's my point, that I would rather voice that now than coming back in and say, well, we never thought about that, we didn't talk about that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it. Next, I think Jody's going to talk to us about the Carver Corner.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Jody Royal, Goodwin Community Development Director. So we're here tonight to talk about the request for proposals for Carver Corner. Last week, we were here and presented those. Oh, I forgot. Anyways, there's a whole team of us here, not just me again, not pretending I have all this taken under control. So we've got Jim, Steve, Randy, Andrew, and Nancy. All can help answer questions when we get to that point. But just for an introduction, so we discussed last week that we have this unique site that has distinctive features that are probably never going to be available to the city for development again. And you can see the site on the screen. The site has not come to us by chance or quickly. The site actually began being assembled in the mid-1990s when the city acquired Carver Pump. This started a discussion about realigning that intersection, but the state at the time told us that they wouldn't even work with us really on that issue if all of the sites, all of the properties weren't acquired. So the city's put more than $500,000 into this project over the past 20 years if you just include direct costs. If you include other more soft costs that were associated with other projects or even the ongoing maintenance, you're probably closer to $750,000 already invested in the project. So this document, the RFP, is the beginning of a process that will be included with other support documents like an About Muscatine and this site facts sheet to go out to promote the city's vision for the redevelopment of the area, starting with the sale of this irreplaceable and significant property. The RFP was written based on many of council's goals, such as being innovative and efficient, partnering, promoting infill opportunities, selling and redeveloping and repurposing city-owned properties, and maintaining the financial stability of the city. City representatives also talked with developers from around the region, other communities, and vested community members on what may work there and what people would like to see there. So the RFP was written to give overarching goals to potential respondents, but not be so prescriptive that we were telling them what we needed or what they needed to do. It indicates that we want an attractive, a vibrant space for both the residents and visitors, that it should be appealing to our gateway from the southern end of town, to our downtown from the southern end of town. And while additional city financial assistance may be available, it is a private undertaking, and that additional public investment should be minimized. This is the start of a process, and that process will include committee reviews, presentations to council and community members most likely, as well as negotiating the terms and conditions of the actual development agreement. As with all infill projects, it's not anticipated to be simple. We've taken care of some of the challenges, but there will be other trials that a developer will have to undertake, and we are looking for somebody with experience in doing that to, again, be the most efficient and most productive, best resulting project that we can get. We want this project to provide the highest and best use of this 7-acre property, and a project that can serve as legacy for this council, honoring the history of our community as well as moving us forward. And so that's all I've got, because you have the hopefully you have the document, because I didn't bring more copies of it, but we'd answer any questions and take any comments, suggestions on how you'd like us to proceed.
Anyone?
Jody,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Jody, if you'd add the acreage all up, do you know about how many acres are we talking about?
About 7.34, I think. That's right.
And my only other question, I guess it's one that I sent the email about, is do we know right now whether it would be called a greenfield or brownfield?
I can actually answer that. So the majority of it is greenfield. It has one section with an environmental covenant on it, which is,
Right at the corner.
Carver Corner.
yes, it's kind of between the two properties up in the north side.
The green square.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead,
Jody,
Sandra.
is, I know we had this about a year back, and I think it was, I'm not sure if it was from Mill Street all the way down to Sampson, but I think it was something called Opportunity Zone.
Oh, so the opportunity zones, so that would be a potential tool that a developer could use. The opportunity zone actually includes the entire south end, the census block that is the south end.
So what I'm asking, that's what I'm asking, would this be coming from Hershey all the way down, or is it only, because I thought it was only starting at Mill Street, but I don't remember that.
The entire property, for that particular census tract, this is the corner right there, so the entire site falls within the.
So everything would be covered under that portion of it. So then, having said that's under the Opportunity Zone, which I think this is the first site that we've ever had that?
Yes.
Okay. Did we not also pass the fact that we wanted to have this whole district also in the TIF as well? Or was
So
it just that?
We already have an established TIF district, and then we included a new tax abatement district, but I
Okay.
don't believe the abatement district came up this far, did it? Do you recall? But this is already part of the South End TIF district.
So then that's what my question is. So then if somebody wanted to actually develop here, could they get a double?
No,
You could only use the
you
Opportunity
can
Zone?
have one or the other. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
You can have tax abatement or TIF. An opportunity zone is their
Yep.
private investment dollars that they would be putting
So
into
then they
this
could get
project.
two.
They could actually, and
They could
quite
get
honestly, it's
Opportunity Zone
probably,
and tax abatement, is what I'm asking.
yes.
Okay.
Because an opportunity zone is private investment.
Right.
The city is not involved in that, so they could get that return on investment in addition to what the city did. There are tax laws typically that account for any additional tax benefit. So like with the low-income housing tax credits or the new market tax credits, there are mechanisms there that make that minimize that occasionally.
So the opportunity zone doesn't belong to the city. We have
But
an
we
area
applied
that's.
for it, and we
have
got it. That's
We
what
have
I was
an
getting
area
at.
where it's allowed to be used, and then private investors could utilize it on this project. This project is in the South End TIF district. They could request tax increment financing on behalf of the city.
So then, that's what I wanted to clarify. So it's almost two incentives on top of what we've already giving them a property potentially to help them develop and potentially offset costs.
Their private investment that they've built up over a period of years, certainly, or a group, that individual or a group. And so really I'm sorry, go ahead.
So have we been able to share that to the investors?
Share that those incentives are available.
Yes.
That will be included in the About Muscatine and About the Site kind of cover letter.
Okay, since this is just a draft that you're providing now.
Correct.
Okay.
And there'll be links to work that's been already done by the city of Muscatine. And there is even a potential, Steve can speak to it probably better than anybody else, of even trying to release that greenfield site and asked DNR to review that if that plume hasn't expanded beyond its current location. So we may be able to do that as well. If not, we can work. We can certainly work around it. You could put a parking lot or other similar structures on that site. So what we've got here, we want to make sure that what this document does, really our goal is to make sure that we've one, that we're meeting council goals and objectives, that we haven't left anything out, that we've allowed for enough flexibility for responses to this RFP. We'll then come up with and obviously there's a scoring component as well. We would ideally get a number of respondents, score those respondents, have a public component piece. We're following a close example of Iowa City, which I provided earlier as well, and then come to council and ideally have council consider or do basically to have presentations and interviews with those development companies. You've probably seen that done here recently in Davenport, Quad Cities, and Iowa City. And then consider those top applicants before the city council and the public. What we really want to make sure is that we haven't foreclosed on any possibilities. We think the document is, I can't remember the word that you used, but that we haven't really foreclosed on any opportunities in this once-in-a-lifetime project down here. And there's been some preliminary discussions with the adjacent property owner that property could be incorporated into an RFP, could be a standalone project. There's a number of ways that could be dealt with as well. So
What Dayburn property?
McKee Button.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Your scoring systems, what did we duplicate that from somewhere else, or how did we come up with that scoring system of 25 points for, how projects further economic development, so and so, and et cetera, et cetera?
Steve's baby.
Hi. Actually, it was taken from the Iowa City past one they used. We've modified it to fit in some of the goals and objectives we have. And a couple of the things that they gave 5 points for, theirs total up to 115. We made this one suggesting it be 100 just for ease of use. But some of them are specific, like the ones with, they gave 5 points for completing the application appropriately. Well, we're not going to accept it unless it's appropriate, so we're not going to give anybody points for that. So we kind of cut those out and modified it to do what we want. So otherwise, the format is much the same.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Jody, I have a quick question. I'm assuming that irregular line between Green Street and Hershey Avenue is allowance for any roadway redesign?
At the top left.
Yeah, up by Hershey, between Hershey and Green.
Right there.
Yes.
That's the current right-of-way line, so that area is currently right-of-way.
Okay.
But it is owned by the city now.
Right.
It's no longer IDOT right away, so we have flexibility with the street and the entire site. So in addition to that 7.34 acres, really you've got the surrounding right away that can be incorporated into a development that works for that entire corridor.
Okay.
Yeah, those of you that may recall the old Carver pump building that was on that corner, that little section you see there actually had a little fountain or a little reflected pond in it. That's where that was located, but it was all located within the public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
So really our next steps would be to finalize the RFP, bring it forward and get it out. We've been able to put together a list of potential applicants, and we would also obviously put it out to the public as well on the city's website and any other suggested methods.
Okay. Go ahead.
Is there any potential state funding of any sort that a developer could get from something like this?
I think there would potentially be, depending upon what the proposal was, we could definitely work with the developer on identifying additional resources. So like in addition to maybe retesting the environmental contamination, if it's still there, we could actually apply for funding through the state for EPA funding to actually clear it. So there are other things that could potentially be done. It just depends on what the proposal is, and once we have that, we can look at those programs.
Housing tax credits.
Remediation for that?
Housing tax credits, new market tax credits is another one. It's not through the state, but they're available in the state. There's funding out there for job creation, so if they were going to do something to create jobs, we could look at that as well.
Good. One last question, Greg. Are we doing any remediation for that plume that you just mentioned?
We're not doing any remediation, it's simply monitoring it, but wells in there at this point. What we would need to do is contact DNR and have it evaluated probably work with Impact 7G, who we've been working with on Mississippi Drive and Grandview, to have them come in, evaluate the site, and make application to DNR to see if we couldn't get that removed. It'd probably be a good thing to do in the near future, very near future.
Okay.
So our plan would be to begin the process of moving this forward, and
Yeah, just for clarity, that restriction, the covenant, only prevents construction of piping through that area of the plume that is capable of conveying gases or other materials. You can still build on the site. You just have to be careful what you're running through there. But, you know, the other option is to go in and retest it. When this occurred, it was in the 90s, and with another 20 years of inundation of floodwaters and other things underneath, there's frankly fairly good possibility that it's clear, but we haven't gone to that step yet.
But that's going to be part of our responsibility as a city to give it to...
That could be negotiated with the developer, the selected developer, as that goes into the development agreement. We are acknowledging as a part of the RFP process that is there, so they have that information at their disposal.
Okay.
They make a proposal, and that would all be addressed in the development agreement.
I have a question. I've got a question on that, that I'm not sure who will answer it, but for those that might not be aware of what we're talking about in that area, can you explain, because I'm not, can you explain what the plume is and what that issue is that we're talking about as far as restrictions on building in that area? What the contamination is?
I don't know what the content is. DNR put together that material. I don't know whether it's specifically addressed in the covenant, but it's some material that's not a problem unless the vapors can get out conveyed through some kind of pipe network. That's old enough now. I'm sure those records are available, but I can't. The idea is just leave it alone, and it's not a problem.
It was petroleum based.
I'm guessing that, but I don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know off the top of my head exactly what it was, but the tests were done.
Just the nature of Carver Pumps, the operations they did, you know, with the milling or machining and so forth, there was oils and.
Normally when they have stuff like that, the requirement is basically if you go in, you pick up the dirt, then you can't remove it. You can't, or you have to remedy it. You have to do some sort of remediation and basically bring in a company and they can basically filter it, or you remove it, you burn it off, and then you bring in a new filter.
But in the 90s when we did this, it was, if I remember correctly, leaving the site alone. Basically, there was a cover put on it, and naturally,
natural attenuation.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what it comes.
Similar to that when they relocated the switchyard off the riverfront, and they sealed that area because of lead in the soil from the axles. It's okay as long as you don't disturb it. I think this ground they're saying you can disturb, you just have to be careful that you don't put anything in there that allows gases or anything to escape.
Yeah. Okay. And I seem to remember the only thing that could be put on it was a hard surface of some parking lot, but.
Not the Carver site.
Okay.
Not the plume.
Okay.
No.
I would be interested in more information about that if we can.
We can get that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the covenant's available.
Yeah.
Mrs. Landy had a question.
I have a question that, is there just one developer gets the whole 7 acres? I mean, is it just for the whole?
Broken up?
Or is it broken up, or is one for all?
Jody?
I think at this point, the plan is for one developer for the entire site.
But we don't know what we'll get at the end of the day. So I don't know that we can answer that specifically at this point in time. But we may be, simply because we don't know what we're gonna get.
Depends on what people are proposing.
Well, somebody could
And
come
if,
in
and
and
if
say,
we,
hey, I have
and
a
if we,
3-acre project.
and if you don't like the results, or we don't get any results, but if you don't like the results, you can always reject those and proceed down a different path. But we have collected, I don't recall, 10, 11 developers, plus there's a couple in Quad Cities here of recent nature. There's a couple local developers that are interested in the property potential development, and one newer developer that's also interested in taking a look at the site. So there seems to be some interest out there.
Okay. I would be curious if we got developers that came in and said they wanted, that, you know, they weren't interested in the entire project or the entire property, you know, I'd be curious to see what those options would be, particularly if they, you know, there was more than one of those type of proposals that came forward. Would they work together side by side, that sort of
Sure.
thing?
We'll just have to wait and see what we get.
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
The only thing I'd say about that is you'd have to guard yourself against having a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, and then you end up with an orphan that nobody wants,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
You know, instead of death by a, you know, dozen.
Maybe then you
Cut.
assign it to one of the adjacent owners.
Thank you, Jody. We appreciate it. Well, our final presentation tonight is going to be, Mrs. Ann Meeker is going to come up and talk to us about possible Peace Park.
I'm already telling Jody she can't leave until I find my presentation.
All right. While she's doing that, do you mind saying your name and address, Mrs. Meeker, for the
Yes,
record?
Ann Meeker, 101 West Mississippi Drive. I am here representing the advisory group for a potential Muscatine World Peace Park. Thank you, Jody. That's very helpful. As I said, I'm here to talk about peace parks, and I guarantee no talk about grease or sludge or crack or.
There you go.
Oh, really?
Although that was extremely
Keeping it
entertaining,
clean,
I have
keeping
to
it
admit.
clean.
If you're going to talk about those things, you might as well be amusing, right?
That's right.
This is a new program that was just installed on my computer yesterday afternoon, and I struggled with it, so I'm missing one slide, and it should be the one following this. And there are a couple of statements that I would like you to just think about for a minute. One is, without peace, there is no tourism. Without peace, there is no tourism. And the other is, every traveler is potentially an ambassador for peace. Those are two fairly obvious statements once they're presented, but frankly, I had never given a thought to any of that. So this was a huge learning opportunity for me, and I think for some of the other members of our group, trying to get our arms around what this is all about. Now, if I can remember how to move around on this, ooh, that was kind of lucky. In order to understand the concept of peace parks, first you must know about the man who was the founder of the idea and who brought it to fruition. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Louis D'Amour. And this is his resume, you can see here. There's quite a bit on that slide for you to digest. He's been doing this for a number of years. He's a very accomplished, very intelligent gentleman whom we met in person a month ago. He decided during his military career to devote his life to things that he would like to see happen, and that is what he has done. As you can see on the slide, he was founder and president of a consulting firm, L.J. D'Amour and Associates. He worked primarily in Canada and worked throughout every province in Canada, worked a lot with the Canadian government, and he did the first study of tourism in the 1970s, prepared at the request of the Canadian government. And as he pointed out to us, they looked initially through a North American lens, which made sense at the time. And of course, if we remember the 70s, I vaguely remember those. No, just kidding. I remember them really well. Stop laughing, Jim, you know what I mean. Really, things were moving forward pretty well. More higher education of our citizens, growing middle class at the time, more opportunities to travel, and people had more income to use for that purpose. So in short, it was a rosy outlook for tourism. So they operated under that, those parameters initially. And then in the early 80s, they decided to look at tourism through a global lens. Needless to say, they were shocked. Let me back up. I think I didn't leave that long enough. What they found was not pleasant. And the result was a pretty dismal look for tourism in the future. So he decided to refocus what they were doing, and they had been what he would call a futurist, looking at and predicting trends into the future. So he decided that his organization needed to kind of flip things around and say, well, okay, how can travel and tourism be a positive force to make the world better, since there was such a list of not so great things going on. So 1986 was a big year. It was the United Nations International Year of Peace, and that was the year that Lou founded the International Institute for Tourism Through Peace. Did I say that right? No, for peace through tourism. Forget that IITP on there. It should be IIPT. I told you I was struggling with the software. They organized the first global conference on tourism, and I believe that's the one that had like 800 attendees, which for the very first one out of the gate was pretty incredible. Went on to have global conferences, starting with that first one in Vancouver. And Lou wasn't a guy to sit around, so they kind of went great guns after a lot of initiatives. The IIPT also promotes a higher purpose of tourism, including the key role of tourism in promoting international understanding, collaboration among nations, protecting the environment and preserving biodiversity, enhancing cultures and valuing heritage, sustainable development, poverty reduction, and reconciliation and healing wounds of conflict. And as I said, you can see he's not a guy that wastes any time. I will have copies available at a later date. I was fighting my printer tonight before the meeting, of the Amman Declaration. It's a collective statement of beliefs from the attendees of that first global conference, that peace is an essential precondition for travel and tourism, and that all aspects of human growth and development, development of tourism as a global vehicle for promoting understanding, trust, and goodwill among peoples of the world, and that all requires an appropriate political and economic framework. The people who signed that committed themselves to the realization of the goals and objectives as enshrined in the United Nations Declaration of Program of Action on a Culture of Peace through our activities and initiatives, and declared their commitment to building a culture of peace through tourism. Significantly, this document was incorporated as an official United Nations document. Some more of the outcomes from that summit. There were 350 peace parks across Canada that were started during that, as that part of that 125th anniversary celebration. So they have a big head start on us, folks. Just some examples of what peace parks can be. The Wharton Glacier International Peace Park is the first and only one that spans a border. It's between the US and Canada, and the pictures, if you go on the internet and look for this, the pictures are stunning. It is a beautiful place. It's part of the province of Alberta in Canada and northern Montana on our side. And they're called different things when they're known just as the park in that country. So Waterton Lakes National Park is what it's called in Alberta, and Glacier National Park in Montana as a standalone unit, but together they are the Wharton Glacier International Peace Park. And they were both declared biosphere reserves by UNESCO and their union as a World Heritage. And if you ever get a chance to go, boy, if I get a chance looking at those pictures, it's an amazing place. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is very similar to Muscatine in that they have a path that runs along the Susquehanna River. So there are some similarities there. The founders were two physicians who had a vision for an artistic space with some monuments and coming together as a community. They are currently trying to find descendants of what was known as the 8th Ward in Harrisburg. This ward was primarily black and poor, so of course it was selected to be demolished to build the Capitol building. So as part of their monument project, they're looking for descendants of that 8th Ward, and that's going on as we speak. And Jamaica has the first Caribbean Peace Park. At the bottom of that screen, I'm not sure what a dub poet is. I have not had time to look that up, but he wrote a poem as part of the dedication of this peace park, and that was one of the quotes that was used from his poem. Yeah, this next one just blew me away. I never would have dreamt there was something like this anywhere in the world. It was a town with no residents, built strictly for tourism. A billionaire in China had the idea, and in their first year they got 5 million visitors, and they have raised 40,000 people out of poverty. And it was one of the most impoverished areas of China, as well as one of the most ethnically diverse. So they had a lot of challenges, and this, I don't even know what to say about this, but to have such an idea and to build it, and it's beautiful. There, again, are pictures online of this place. To think there's no one who permanently resides there, but they employ over 3,000 people who before had no employment opportunities. So you can see that peace parks take on a life of their own based on the culture and the population of the place where the peace park resides. It can literally be anything. It just depends on what your goal is as a community. As I said, Lou came to Muscatine for 3 days in March. We didn't give him a lot of notice, and he was just great in working out a schedule where he could be here. We had a great get-acquainted dinner with him the evening of Saturday, March 23rd, when he arrived. And that was a learning experience in itself. Then we also had a luncheon meeting with local residents and some interested people on Sunday, followed by a roundtable discussion. Lou was able to attend Rotary on Monday and was able to talk to some of the Rotarians. Don't know if you noticed, but one of those peace parks was sponsored by Rotary. And it's not the only one that Rotarians have been involved in around the world. Then he went on a tour of Muscatine on Monday. Here he is on tour at the Sino-US Friendship House. Then on Tuesday morning, he met with the director of the Stanley Foundation, and Tuesday afternoon, again, another group of interested citizens heard his presentation. I just love this picture. Here's Max Stanley, who was really the beginning of so many things in Muscatine, including peace initiatives, and we all know our famous resident, Sarah Landy. She'll probably shoot me for saying that, but Sarah was involved in Sister Cities at the state level way, way, way back at the beginning. And of course, we know she's been very influential in our relationship with China. So to have her and Max and Lou in the same picture, I just really enjoy that. Anyway, tourism really is economic development. I think I have this in a later slide, but there's another Peace Park that has a hotel and some other profit-making entities that support the park. And that's part of the concept of a Peace Park. It's not a park where you go and have a couple of benches and sit and contemplate your navel or whatever people do. It's intended to be economic development. So in discussing economic support for the park and so forth, Lou said people will come if they have a compelling reason. He believes our compelling reason is to build on the legacy of Alexander Clark and Muscatine's relationship with China. That relationship, he believes, will be key in the 21st century, and I would agree with that. I'm totally off my notes now, so I have no idea what's going on. But at any rate, Lou is making inquiries as we speak on the feasibility of a conference here in Muscatine this fall or in the spring of 2020. He also said if we do a presentation on Alexander Clark, Naomi King, who is the wife of A.D. King, Martin Luther King's brother, she will attend, as well as Dr. Babs and Orabanjo, I guess, president and CEO of the A.D. King Foundation. A.D. King drowned in his swimming pool. The family believes he was also murdered because there was no water in his lungs. So at any rate, his widow is 97, something like that, but still travels and would come if we did an Alexander Clark presentation. It was amazing when Sarah and Lou started to chat, they knew all the same people at the high levels of the tourism industry, and it was pretty amazing to watch. It's also amazing the people that Lou knows are just, I don't know. Everything he said was a revelation to me. Muscatine, as everybody knows, has a history of reaching out globally. There were two significant residents, one I think more well-known than the other. I think because the Stanley name is in so many places here. Catherine Miller is a lesser-known but equally significant person of interest in Muscatine. And some of the things that you probably already know about Maxwell Stanley. The war to end all wars, if you recall, was World War I. And it was after that that he just decided we could not continue to do this to each other. And obviously that was proven because then there was World War II. I don't know if it was the war to end all wars that ended all wars or something. I don't know. But anyway, Max had many conferences with pretty high-level attendees. And the Stanley Foundation continues that legacy of drawing people together. And I think that's something that we don't want to ever lose track of or neglect to honor in Muscatine, because that's pretty unique, especially in a community of this size. Catherine Miller was a 1930 college graduate, which was very unique at that time for a woman. This lady, I wish I had known her, reading about everything she did and the places she went, especially that one, 1,000 miles up the Amazon by boat. I don't know about everybody else here, but I would not take that on. Oh, the only woman on the boat. I really wouldn't take that on. She was all over promoting global education and just a remarkable woman. She died at age 99, but was still writing for the Iowa Peace Links newsletter at the age of 98. That's pretty impressive. Wish we still had that Iowa Peace Links newsletter, or maybe we can find a copy of that. I think we all are aware of all the exchanges that Muscatine has done over the years through the Rotary Club and other governmental type programs. Lots of exchanges between citizens of Japan, Germany, and China here. And our Sister Cities organization is very vibrant and very active in tourism. We believe that Muscatine is ripe for this endeavor. We all know that commercial brands come and go. In 30 years from now, the world will be very different. Muscatine will be very different, and we'll probably have a discussion about branding the community. Again, branding Muscatine as a city with an international focus is a long-lasting brand that never dies, never has to be reinvented. That makes me think of the site that we're looking at for development. We want beauty. We want a great gateway to our downtown and to our riverfront. We want some economic development, so there's revenue coming to the city for this. And I think, okay, you know, great, maybe we'll have some condos and maybe some shopping and so forth. And in 20 years, it will have deteriorated, and we will be redoing and redoing, like you see all the strip malls and all that. And if you have a Peace Park, which will eventually, I'm talking future, have a structure on it, and we're holding conferences talking about world peace with our beautiful #1 in the state hotel, being able to handle conference attendees, to me, this is the best use for that 7.43 acres. And the McKee Button Company, I did not know this until just recently from Terry Eagle through my husband. The McKee Button Company building was the only building that was built specifically as a button factory. I really hadn't thought about that before, but I did not know that. And it's enormous. It could easily accommodate multiple uses. So we believe that that's the economic engines that will support the park and support future development, which is also our goal. Chinese travel to the U.S. is enormous. I think we all know that. Although most visit New York, Los Angeles, a good number also come to Chicago. I remember Daniel Wang saying a very conservative estimate of Chinese visitors to Muscatine would be 100,000 a year. Think about that. Lou's visit was how much money? About $1,500. He was here for 3 days, between meals and hotel and so forth. That adds up quickly when you have 100,000 new visitors coming to your community. In 2017, there were approximately 3.17 million Chinese visitors to the United States, and it's forecast to increase to above 4.1 million by 2023. I really think we need to have part of that, and I think this is the vehicle to do it. I think it's our best option for future economic benefit. So there's a whole bunch more information, but I didn't want us to be here until midnight. But we do have a choice. We can either let the efforts of previous generations wither and die, or we can raise them up as examples for us to emulate and carry forward. It obviously requires the support and efforts of many, but Muscatine has proven itself more than capable. When we set our mind to something, we get it done. We owe it to every citizen of Muscatine to grab this opportunity and raise everyone's vote. So,
thank you, Mrs. Meeker.
You're welcome.
Any questions, comments,
I would just,
clarification?
I would say, in kind of in addition to the comment my comment earlier to Jody was kind of alluding to this, that I would like to see, I would be interested in seeing proposals that came forward that incorporated you know, this concept into it where there's some kind of development alongside it. I think there's enough space there
It's a
for,
lot of area.
for, you know, different types of development to go on in the same space. And I have long thought that the McKee Button building would be a great place to migrate the museum to.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so that's where I'm at on this. I very much am in favor of the Peace Park concept and the types of tourism it can bring, along with just the idea of promoting peace in general. And I would, you know, really like to see stuff that came forward that I would have more favor towards things that incorporated the park as well as the economic development in that. So.
I experienced the first Earth Day in college, so I remember the 70s very well. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I had one question. Or can you email the presentation to us?
I'll do my best. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I
know
don't
I
want a
can
printed
solve the
copy.
problem having more time, yeah.
Okay. And then you had another document.
I wanted to print the
you-
handout for you tonight, and it just never would give me the right thing. So, yes, I do have a handout.
I would take the handout by email as well.
If you
Email
could get them
handout?
to Cinda, she could get them distributed to all of us.
Or I can email them to everybody easily.
That's fine
That
too.
works. Perfect, I will do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Well, hearing nothing else tonight, we'll go ahead and check with Council. Councilman Harvey, did you have anything tonight?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Councilman Spread?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Nothing at this time, Your Honor.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Yes. Riverbend neighbors will meet on Monday night, 7 p.m. at Fire Station Number 2 on Stewart Road. Everyone is welcome to attend, and I have a question for Jim.
He was anxiously awaiting it.
I know he was. I can tell. How's our levy holding up?
He's used up his 10 minutes.
I was ready to have the end of the meeting there. Sorry about that. Mayor, Council, levee's doing fine. Water level's dropping, even with the precipitation that we have, that has occurred north of here. Even with the next 72 hours with what's predicted to fall up here, the level will still fall. It's just not going to fall as fast. We haven't had any problems with any of the levees.
Okay. Do you think we've seen the worst of it, or do you think there's going to be another
I would
crest?
never be foolish enough to say that.
Okay.
I actually bet a guy $1 that this was going to be the high water event for the year at the Y today. So I think so, but it all depends on what the weather pattern is that establishes. I mean, all of the flooding that occurred in '93 didn't come from snow melt. It came from a series of large rain events that happened one after another, after another, after another. And I think those all started sometime in the summer. So you never know.
No.
But even with the 20 plus inches of snow that's fallen up north, that's all held into those models. You know, the 10 inches of snow is approximately equal to 1 inch of rain. So it isn't like there's that much that's fallen up there. And like I said, the water level is still going down, and levees are good.
We're in
All
good shape.
We're good for now.
You're gonna
Good.
tell the people in Minnesota that snow's not.
Hold on to it for a while. Yeah.
It's not a big deal, it's only an inch of water.
If we're only gonna
I
now
know they'll appreciate that.
If I was in Minnesota, I would say something different. That's all
Yeah.
I said. But it just, I hope you all appreciate, I hope all of you appreciate what a huge bullet we dodged there. But I mean, we've had a pretty dry spring so far. Kind of still looks like maybe it might be that way, but it's also tending back to come around to more of a normal spring. But if we'd had the precipitation we're getting now 3 weeks ago, it would have been an event. So,
Okay.
we're good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Councilman Saucedo?
I have one item that I'd like to talk to Jody about. I emailed her in regards to clarification on this. For us, there was a email that I received from a reporter in regards for clarification from an April 8th school board meeting that was requiring the city to incorporate a waterproof shelter for 360 students And the superintendent was explaining that that would add another $500,000 to $1 million on the project. I emailed back and request to say, you know, what have we done? How did this come about? And I'd like for her to explain, and then kind of maybe some action items or discussion things that we could move forward in the future for.
So the storm shelter or safe space for a school, in the 2015 IBC is included, it's Chapter 423, and it is was adopted by council in 2017, became active. So the projects they're bringing forward this spring, are some of the first projects that it applies to. They're doing actual additions, not renovations, and that triggers the requirement to comply with the International Building Code standards. So the current project is the STEM project out at the high school. That is, we've been having conversations with them since probably the first week that I was in this role, and we've talked about the requirement to have storm shelters. They brought in plans a couple days before they went out to bid. They do not include a storm shelter or any hardening for tornado events in our community, or that may happen in our community, which means that they have to withstand 250-mile-per-hour winds and projectiles of 4 inches that would be dislodged by such winds. Anyways, so we did meet. Like I said, we have met with the school district and discussed those requirements, and we've made as many modifications as we can as city staff and building officials. We're not allowed to waive life safety features of the code, so we have offered them some options related to how to meet the code, or even, so one was comply with the code as it sits. The second one is we would be willing to modify the non-life safety stuff. So if you look through IBC 5, look through the statutory requirements, it requires certain levels of plumbing and electricity and stuff like that. So we determined that those were not necessarily life safety for a tornado event. They're not, in a tornado event, you're not likely to be in some place for hours. And if you are, plumbing is probably the least of your concerns. And so we were willing to take out any plumbing requirements, the requirement for a generator, certain lighting, to allow the lighting to be provided by battery-operated means rather than electrical means, which saves some other things. Waive all of those non-life safety aspects of a hardened, safe space. Or the other option, they could also bring us a letter from the state fire marshal that says that the Muscatine School District projects are exempt from the requirement under state law, or to come in and request an amendment to the code related to the storm shelter requirement. And so that's kind of where we're at. We have not gotten a request, we as staff have not gotten a request to bring forward, and I don't believe that any of you have actually gotten a request, just comments about what is happening.
Mine was just an email, basically, from the reporter asking me if I was aware of it, and I was not aware of it. And I guess the more that I started reading into it, the more I started, and I reached out to the school board in request to finding out a little more information on this, and their explanation to me was that this is a state code that is optional, that the fire marshal is once they made that requirement, they said, small cities, there's no way they could even afford something to this effect. The comments that I had gotten back was, they did the Van Heck building for $3.8 million with no requirement. They did the McKinley building for $4.5 million with no requirements, and they're estimating $1.2 million for 360 kids in a school that has 1,500 kids.
So there are a couple of things in that. So the state fire marshal does adopt building code for the state in jurisdiction that covers jurisdictions who have not otherwise adopted a code. The city of Muscatine has adopted a code. Therefore, the state fire marshal has said our laws, our codes apply to these projects.
Okay.
The Van Eck Center was the first one that it could have applied to. It is a separate building, a PE/gym structure. The building inspector, the person reviewing the plans at the time, gave them the benefit of the doubt and classified it as a gym structure rather than an educational structure. The storm shelter requirement applies to critical emergency services or educational services. It doesn't just apply to every building or educational buildings. So when he classified it as a gym structure, it was no longer required to have a storm shelter. It was operating as a PE facility separate, wasn't part of the school. So that was done before. The McKinley building addition, there was, which is what happened to get me involved early on. There was communications at site plan review time, which, as we've talked about before, comes before the plans are submitted. And at that time, there's a little, there was discussion about what that project included. And there was a statement about there being a gym and 4 temporary classrooms. Mike Stinsland, who was here at the time, had communications with the school district about the occupancy of the gym structure. At that time, there was a letter provided by the school district that said in the gym structure there would be an occupancy of no more than 50 students at a time. 50 is the magic number, because if you go over 50, you're required to do a storm shelter. If it's under 50, it's not. Mr. Stinsland agreed that with the occupancy of 50, they would not be required to have the storm shelter. When the plans came in, there actually was a gym structure, 4 classrooms, 2 bathrooms, and I believe 4 or 6 office spaces. The occupancy level was higher. We had a lot of discussions with the school district and meetings with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, the architect, a number of people. In the end, because of the time frame, and again, they were calling the office within the week before they were awarding the bid, and we met with them actually on the morning of the board meeting at which they were awarding the bid. It was, we determined at that point in time, we had kind of committed to allowing them to proceed without the storm shelter, and that we would honor that on that particular project. However, that it would be required going forward. That was communicated to the school district.
Okay. My thoughts around this, and just so we can be clear, is a storm shelter for 360 kids in a 1,500, student school is a little bit hard for me to look at, and then requiring them to make that request. And this is the first storm shelters of any shelters that we've done, according to what you explained to me in the email. We haven't required it of any other new structure of any kind. So you had mentioned in the email that we could look at options of amending the code. And for me, that is where I would like to have that discussion move to, because I feel this is a very difficult thing for me to make a requirement of a school board to have that type of a change that drastically affects their budgets. And we have
we met with the local fire marshal, so fire staff, and we had that exact discussion, because there are 2 parts. By code, they're required to meet the storm shelter requirement for all students in the building. We are trying to be as flexible as possible, and with the understanding that just like fire sprinklers, you're only required to install those in the addition. You're not required to address the existing part of the building. That's a life safety issue. We kind of followed that model in trying to be as flexible as we could in allowing them to protect the safety of the children, at least in the new structure, to the degree that was possible. And you should also be aware so when it says a structure that addresses the safety of 361 occupancy, it's using a 5-foot radius. So I'm pretty sure in the case of an impending tornado, we're all, one, skinnier than we were yesterday, and two, we're not gonna care if the next person is shoulder to shoulder. Quite honestly, that's kind of how, when I remember doing tornado drills, and it's kind of how it works.
But there's other communities that have already amended their code. Bettendorf went through this already as well too. And from my understanding, if we make that request, that is something that we as a council can make, not staff.
Yes.
Staff is enforcing the code that
So-
they're basically saying to what that code is. So all I'm asking is, I think that's something that we would like to make as a discussion item for an in-depth furthermore, but I don't want to, drag this meeting on further. My request is to keep that, put that on an agenda item and as a discussion, and then I would like to have some of the school board members come in and discuss this as well too, before we make this requirement.
And just to be clear, there are, Jason has put together a list of a number of communities, and it's actually the majority of our peers have chosen not to make that change in the code, but it can certainly come forward for council consideration for a code change. Absolutely, and that was one of the things that, as Jody mentioned, we gave them as an alternative to come back to city council and recommend a code change, pulling that section out of the code. So,
Jody, this is required for hospitals and schools?
Hospitals, critical emergency services. So it would be the police department, the fire departments, the emergency room, the hospital, ambulance services, those types of.
Nursing homes?
I did not see nursing homes listed in there. And I just want to clarify, so when you think about it not being required before, and again, I'm probably dragging this on more than people want me to, sorry, that in 2013, there was a very deadly tornado that actually killed 13 children in a school that didn't have a storm shelter, thus the 2015 code added it back in to there, yes.
and, sorry, one last statement, because it was incorrectly stated at the school board meeting. So I just want to be very clear that the state fire marshal has not exempted Muscatine from the requirements.
And I'm not saying that they exempted.
No, the school board, the superintendent, the school superintendent stated it incorrectly. Muscatine has not been exempted from this requirement. I want it to be very clear that that is the case.
Okay.
And they could provide a written statement exempting Muscatine Community School District, but they have not done so to date.
Bettendorf, is that what you said?
No, the
No.
school, the
The
state
school
fire
district
marshal.
could request one, but we have not received one today.
And that's all I'm getting at is,
Right.
when I had discussions with them, they obviously were trying to work with staff through it. And then my personal view is that obviously staff is following what code is. So I can understand that. And obviously, if we want to help our community as well as our school board, in my view, is I think it's something that we need to address, discuss, and then hear both sides before we make a decision.
And I think they've done a great job of providing multiple options for the school district in this case, so.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Jody. Did you want,
If I'm next.
is it about, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was just
All
gonna,
right,
yeah,
go
that's,
ahead.
I sensed that Santos might be
He
done
was
with
about
that, and
done.
so that was gonna also be one of the questions I was gonna ask about, so I was gonna just elaborate a little bit. I have, I think, the same stance that Councilman Saucedo has on that. I would like to see some options brought forward. I did speak with some school board members on this. The email that I got from the reporter was not my first, I was not my first understanding of this, but I had not really had a lot of detail. So I guess, what's the capacity on the Van Heck building?
Honestly, I couldn't answer that.
Because I mean, I've got concern that didn't fall under any kind of requirement. I mean, but anyway.
There are a number of local industries that are following this code section voluntarily.
Okay.
And we do have, and can find examples of that for you.
So do we not have anything at the high school that qualifies as any kind of storm shelter whatsoever?
Not that I'm aware of.
Currently, they go in the hallways.
Right.
Okay.
That's basically what I was explained to when I contacted them. I said, so where do they go now?
Okay.
And the buildings are not rated for 250-mile-an-hour winds, which, obviously they're rated for a tornado. I didn't realize the 4-inch, size pieces, but.
Right. I would definitely like to have, some options on this. I would hate to see a STEM building for the high school have to not exist. You know, I mean, if we can build a great big gym for kids to play in, you know, we should be able to build a building that they can learn in as well. And although I do very much value the safety of the students, so I don't want to dismiss the concept of having a storm shelter. I want to look at some options on this and see what we can do, if we can come up with something that is not going to cancel a project like this, which it could, from what I understand. So that I don't have anything else on that. Santos covered most of it. The other question I had actually, though, is also for you. If do you know what the status is on the HVAC at Hershey Manor?
We are, the required third-party contract entities for things like physical needs assessment, appraisal such as that, have been secured by the lender to start the process of the refinancing to actually have the money to do the HVAC replacement.
Okay, so does that give you any kind of idea of a time frame?
I would love to say yes. My best guess is probably about 6 months.
Okay, well, a guess is better than nothing, so I will take that.
Just consider it a true guess.
Absolutely, I accept that, and I didn't have anything further tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Jody. Staff, anything tonight?
No, I think we've covered it all.
I just had a couple of things. Reminder, we have the mayor's youth job fair at the Muscatine High School on Monday from 3 to 5. We'll have a variety of employers there. Youth can come out, age 14 and over, and secure their first job, whether it be for summer or all through the year. Also, reminder, we have a wonderful symphony orchestra coming up Saturday night, dueling batons. It should be awesome. Thank you all for coming. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Good evening.